if you could go back in a time machine and give, advice about, man, maybe do this a little different. What were maybe some of the things you might do a little different?
Taking the time to understand that it doesn't have to be my idea to be the best idea. To allow team for free collaboration. Don't be afraid to listen to outside, input. Everyone's idea is valuable. I mean, that's how innovation happens. Get out of my own way and listen to my own advice is probably the biggest learning lesson. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the client thinks. And at the end of the day, if we can all pitch in ideas to make the best solution, and that's where it comes from.
Imagine having direct access to someone who's navigated life's toughest terrains and come out stronger. Someone who's been there, done that, and can guide you with empathy, experience, and honesty. This isn't just advice. It's a lifeline, a strategy session, a chance to learn from my journey so you can accelerate yours. Without the ability to be self-aware and introspective, the ability for you to get to where you want to go, nearly impossible. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the David Guttman podcast. Have a really, really interesting and exciting guest today, Jakob Carmichael. He's the CEO of RescAlert. Am I saying that right, RescAlert?
Correct. Yeah, RescAlert.
Yeah. And the reason why I wanted to have Jakob on in particular was we're already at the ripe old age of 24, and you started, if I remember, when you were 21.
Correct. Yeah, started the company when I was 21, had the idea when I was 17, a junior in high school. So
Okay, so I want to go, a little bit back, you and I got to spend a little bit of time yesterday talking about your business and
sure.
some of your background. So I do want to cover a little bit of that for the audience today. But maybe start, about growing up, what your folks were like, what your folks did. I know your dad works in your business, but maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, we had a wonderful childhood. I have an older brother, younger brother, so middle child syndrome. But no, a great family. To instill, some pretty good morals inside of me. Watching my father, grow up and work. My mom, she was a nurse, and then she became a stay-at-home mom when we were through, I guess you would say, elementary school, middle schoolish. Once we got to high school, my mom's, going back to work, being bored at the house. But grew up around my family. My mom raised us. My dad was the guy. He went to work Monday through Friday, and then worked weekends too. And built himself in his own career to, started at the bottom and then worked his way to the top. And being able to see that, my dad's my idol, so I look up to him, being able to see everything he's been able to accomplish. I've always wanted to be like my dad. So, I mean, my childhood was great to really get to it. I mean, whether
Did,
I was doing school or playing with my brothers, we was doing something.
Now your dad, he has a PhD. Like like was he an entrepreneur? Like what did he do? Because if I know he's now working with you in the business, but he did retire. So
Correct.
like, what was his career trajectory like, and why did you decide? One, I've got this idea for this. I mean, was the idea to have it be an AI driven business when you were 17,
Negative.
or okay, yeah, it's more okay. So maybe talk a little bit about like what your dad's progression was like, and maybe what you
Yeah,
thought
for
about,
sure.
what you wanted to emulate, and maybe what you wanted to do slightly different, maybe.
So my dad, he's got his start in the security world. So if you've ever been through airport security or anything like that, my dad loves the saying, you may not know who he is, but you definitely use the services if you've been through something like that or any type of public transport. But, my father, PhD computer science, with a master's in electrical engineering as well too. Kind of, just trying to follow in his footsteps is really what got me into the computer science. My whole family is kind of, software nerds, if you can want to put down to it.
Right.
We love sitting behind a keyboard and punching away at numbers. But, following my dad, I watched him start off working in other companies, helping make other people, successful and being that it guy. And then my dad took a chance, when I was seventh grade in middle school, and went out on his own, started his own company, and became that entrepreneur in himself. My father had a couple businesses in the past, but that was really in the big space where he took that big chance on himself to really expand his own business. And my father at the time, retired, and then going into years later, I'm like, man, I could use an experienced CTO on my team, and begging my dad. He tells me no two, 3 times, and he meets my team and bites the tech bug again, and got mom's permission. That was the blessing I actually realized I needed to convince, and was able to bring him on board. Now he is my CTO at the time. Now he told me to give me 5 years, and then he is going to take that retired life again with mom and start just traveling the world. So
Wow, that's wonderful. And so, you are How about your relationship with your brothers? Are you guys super close? Are they also local to the Pensacola area? Are they elsewhere?
They are, yeah. So they work with me too. So
Oh,
it's great. Yeah. So brothers get to work with me every day. I have a really good, close relationship with my older brother Robert. Me and him. I don't know. You look at your older brother too. He probably doesn't know this too much, but you look up to him a little bit. You want to be similar like him. And then me and my younger brother, we're only a year apart. So I mean, we're like partners in crime all the way growing up through the
mm.
years. If one of us was in trouble, we were both in trouble. And if one of us was doing something that was productive, we were both doing something that was productive. So we've always been kind of inseparable at the hip. But
Well, so tell me how. So you said you had the original idea when you were 17. Maybe take me from that journey to something like 4 years later, because you actually go to college, get your engineering degree, if I remember
So
correct.
computer science. So
Oh, okay.
actually, I'm a college dropout, but I'm back in college again now. It's something that I wanted to do, but kind of going back to those days, I always kind of knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I just didn't know what it was I wanted to do. And I would come with the dumbest ideas. Me and my father, we used to do our own little like Shark Tank. I'd bring him a new idea I had every week, and he would tell me, "This is why this wouldn't work. This is why this probably isn't the best idea." And all the way down to heated snow tires, right? So we were living in New Hampshire at the time, and I'm like, "Hey, it's heated snow tires." He's like, "No, that's not a good idea because what if someone pours gas on the ground? Now you just set the gas station ablaze." I'm like, "Okay." So burning through ice, not good. But then I brought him the solution when I had the idea was when Hurricane Harvey hit Texas in 2017,
Mm.
and you saw all these disparate organizations from police, fire, EMS, and local PD and the sheriff's department all using their different software tools that they use day to day to manage their resources and respond and deploy to help people. And this is where you would see people to go save somebody that was saved 2 days prior. So we'd have the local police department go show up to do a service call where 2 weeks or 2 days prior to that, someone had already been rescued by the fire department because the fire department just happened to be driving through or something, right? And being able to provide that rescue aid and service. So I'm like, this is where I was like, there's a discommunication in the systems when it's time for these organizations to come together. They're too siloed. And that's when I came up with the idea. What if we bridged a platform that basically created a two-way data communication back to these software tools that the boots on the ground get to keep using what they know, love, and trust as the first responders, while we get to put these all on one unified platform so the public safety director can make the best decision with the resources that he has available, whether that's the organizations and even volunteers that are coming into town like Red Cross and United. So
Most 17-year-olds, they're going to be thinking about how to build a new video game, like Grand Theft Auto, and you're thinking about how to tie municipal databases together. Explain that to me. That's a very strange thing for a 17-year-old.
Sure, sure. No, so like it came down like the Shark Tank things, right? I brought this to my dad, and my dad's like, "Well, you're onto something with this." But the reason no one's done it is because it's extremely difficult. You take all these different systems and you start tying them in together. It takes one platform and this big network that you have integrated to push a software update, and you break the entire chain. I'm like, okay, so that's a problem. Now I love solving problems, so I'm like, all right, this is something I could get behind. So doing research myself, I locked myself in the bedroom and built my very first model using machine learning that basically did an automated data mapping tool. So it's like 98% accurate at the time, where it would actually populate new data fields into different databases when it didn't know what that was. So, for example, like let's say this water bottle, if you digest a new update in your platform and you make a new spot in the data table that's storing this device, a water bottle, well, the other systems aren't going to know what that is, and that's when it breaks. Mine automatically would populate that into the other systems. So I built the first prototype, didn't work. I mean, complete
Right.
shambles, but it was a proof of concept.
Sure.
And then that kind of what kicked me off into moving forward. Graduated high school, enrolled into the local university, and then 2 days in, I was like, you know what? This could be something. And I dropped out and I started pursuing it pretty heavily. And then I recruited, 6 core developers to help me build the thing. Cause that's where I made my first mistake. I thought I could do it by myself and I was going to make a gajillion dollars and I was going to be this, great Mark Zuckerberg or Elon
Right.
Musk. And I realized really quick you can't do it on your own. So that's probably the biggest learning lesson I learned at the very beginning stages.
So how'd you recruit those 6 people? You're a 21-year-old kid, college dropout. In fact, not like college dropout, but, maybe like 2 weeks in college,
Yeah,
didn't even get
right.
through year 1, semester 1. So it's like, how'd you recruit them? Where'd you find them?
Yeah, so LinkedIn. I was beating the streets, LinkedIn, and anybody that would take a conversation with me, I was talking about. Even if it was the guy standing in line with me at Walmart while I was waiting to buy my groceries, whatever I could do to tell people what I was trying to work on, I did. So I would basically pitch this idea: Hey, I can't pay you, but I have this really cool problem that I think we could solve together. and I'm in the process of fundraising. So once we do raise this seed round, I can pay you. So what's your thoughts of taking a gamble on this? And I'm like, I can make you a lot of money in a couple years. And it's kind of where I scored my core six, and started hitting the local universities, and I would look who graduated from this university in computer science, and then I
Right.
would DM them, hey, got a cool project I'm working on. Would you be willing to take a meeting? And that's kind of how it kicked off to this day. I probably met with over 200 developers before I found the core guys.
Wow.
Yeah.
That that's an amazing story. It's funny, people are always talking about I always say, I've said this on a bunch of my podcasts, where people, so many people fancy themselves entrepreneurs, but they really aren't. Like, that's such outside the box thinking, and people don't realize that one of the most important things about being a successful entrepreneur is being able to is the creativity of how you solve problems, right?
Sure.
Because they're the one thing that's, in fact, I don't think you can find a business that they had an idea, they raised money, they did the idea, they built the company up, they sold it. I don't think that's ever happened in the
Sure.
history of companies, right?
Right.
And so you're gonna hit roadblocks, you're gonna hit, speed bumps, sometimes mountains, right? And if you don't know how to think creatively, not lose your head, keep calm and figure out solutions. Man, so you found 6 guys, 200 plus interviews to find a core 6. And how many of those 6 are still with you?
All 6 of them. Yeah, to this day,
Really?
they're all shareholders. They work 6 months for free. So I
Right?
was able to raise that seed round of 1.4, and then once we raised that round, we were kinda off to the races. I mean, whether at the beginning of those 6 months, we were doing anything we can to get our software in people's hands as we were still building it and
Right.
tweaking it to get that feedback, so we were giving it away. We were like, "Here, just try it." And anybody that would take a chance on us, it didn't have to be in the public safety sector because we were just testing our integration capabilities. So
Right.
we were working with the local humane society, anybody that would give us an opportunity to touch their databases or make 2 systems work with each other, we took it on, and then build up our client pool of proven concepts, and that's what we used to raise that round.
So, who's your first paying customer and how'd you get them?
Yeah. So, first paying customer was a municipality at a pretty sized county level. Just beating the streets, letting people know that how we could solve their pains. I mean, just cold calling, right? Like, hey, I got a system that not only is going to be able to help you respond and be a little bit more prepared for a disaster when it comes your way, but not only that, I can predict it and tell you before it actually gets there and tell you what to face, so you can already have your resources ready to meet the problem at hand. We have a funny saying, our 3 Ps: we predict, we prepare, and we prevail against any disaster, whether that's a domestic threat, man-made, or a natural disaster that from God Himself. So I presented this option as that I have a tool that's basically an extension of your staff that will do the monitoring of all these different systems for you and let you know what's important, so you know what you have at hand and what decision to make in the right time.
And, if you don't mind me asking, which municipality was that?
I am under NDAs
Oh,
on
that's
who
fine.
we
No,
could
that's
work with,
yeah, that's
but
fine.
yeah,
Well, so what were they hard to convince? Was it a protracted negotiation on the contract
not hard to
or
convince at all. No,
really?
they're a lot of the government municipalities, I mean, they're really easy to work with if you can prove a case. So I would say your biggest struggle in the government space is their sales cycle. I mean, you're
Right.
from the first time you're talking to a client, they're working in budgeting years, right? I mean, their goal is to help people, and that's what they want to do. If you can provide a solution that's going to help them do their job better, more efficiently, then it's a no brainer for them. It's just when can they get that and afford that system? So we would actually give the system away because we would get a client, let's say, under contract, right? And they're like, we can't afford it out of our operating budget till we rebudgetize next year or even a year down the road. Okay, not a problem. We'll give you the system until that time comes into place, and then we'll lock in under contract and being able to move forward with that client. And they would just kind of retroactively pay us back for the
Oh.
fees or the free service that we were able to provide. Because at the end of the day, our goal is to help people, right? That's why we got started in this thing. It just so happened it could actually be a business. I mean, when I started, it was just to solve a problem. It wasn't supposed to be a business. It just kind of turned into that to this day.
So you got your core team of 6. You guys are cranking out the code. You're building the product. You're getting your first customers. At what point do you get your 2 brothers involved? Do you get your dad involved? Like, who jumped first? Who is the hardest to convince?
Sure. So probably my father, and my father, he's my go-to guy, right? So I lean on him to advice for everything. Every son I think wants to be like their dad in some aspect of
Yeah.
life, right? So following him, I'd bring him everything. I may not take his advice on everything, but I do go to him with pretty much anything, whether that's personal or business related, because I just want to hear, what he has to say. Um, so he was probably involved before he was even involved, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Coming in and providing assistance, and whether it's just providing, things what not to do because he's been down that path and it didn't work out for him in the past, or decisions that he has made and they did work out for them. And my brothers, they were willing to jump ship immediately with me to come on board. I mean, we work together every day. I mean, it's great being able to work with your family.
Sure.
Usually people say there's a problem working with family because people start to get lenient and things don't get done. They're like, well, that's family. I'm going to get paid regardless, right? That's never been a problem. I've been working with my family for probably the past 6 years and different jobs that I've worked with, whether it was working for my dad or other companies, me and my brother still kind of would get jobs together. And, we all carried our own weight. It was all more of a competition, if anything, of who was doing more. Right. So that competitive spirit kind of drives us. But getting them to jump ship and come with me, wasn't a hard decision at all. They saw the growth of where we were going and they were like, this is cool. We get to work together and make money and have a good time. So
Well, I think it depends on the family.
sure.
It's funny. I just have one older brother, and we worked at the same company once, but we only worked on the same project. He was working. He was a software developer and was working on an interesting project, and brought me in. And even though I'm his younger brother, I was managing the project, and so similar to you, managing my older brother. But it was actually really enjoyable experience. Like I definitely enjoyed it, and again he busted his butt. Like it was
Right.
not there was no, oh, I'm getting paid anyway. It was the opposite. It was like not so much civil rivalry, but we don't want to let each other down. You
Sure.
know.
Sure. Yeah. No. Very, very much makes sense. I mean, even my sister. So I have a half sister from one of my mother's first relationships. Got pregnant in
Mhm.
high school and the
Mhm.
situation. She even works with us now too,
Oh.
and it's great. And she just recently, I guess you would say recently, back in my life over the last 5 years, we didn't grow up together. Didn't really, we knew of each other, but didn't really, grow up in the same home. Hardly ever saw each other.
Mm.
Maybe every 4 or 5 years it would be a 30-minute visit there, but other than that, we didn't see much of each other. And now, we work together every day. So it's great. She's actually my assistant. So she helps filter my phone calls, make sure I'm following up on the meetings that I need to be a part of and helping put out fires. So it's awesome.
Nice. Well, so now, so you obviously put this whole thing together. So I would imagine, your older brother even probably no big deal. And even your dad working for you as opposed to, I mean, I get how it is, right? It's kind of
Sure.
like, well, we work with each other.
Right.
I get there's some of that for sure. But,
Sure.
any issue there or, was there any sort of like, because sometimes there's egos and personalities involved.
Not really. I have
Yeah.
one of the God has blessed me with the most supportive family on the planet. Like they just anything that they can do to help, they're willing to help out and be a part of. So I mean, there's sometimes where I gotta ask and be like, hey, I really need you on this. And it's a Saturday call and I need you to go take care of it because it's important.
Right.
And maybe it's like, but we all do our part and we all pitch in. And I think that's what makes us work so good together is that everyone carries their own weight, and then some, and we're not afraid to help out the other person if somebody else is may be falling behind. Maybe they had a bad week, or they're sick, or whatever it might be, or something else happened up in personal life. We lift each other up, and that's not just for the family. That's to everybody inside of our organization. So we have 23 employees now, growing. Plan to hire 10 more in the next 2 weeks. So we're we're moving pretty fast. So everyone has a really good, I guess, work relationship mentality where we support each other, whatever that might be, and no one's afraid to put on another hat just to for the betterment of the company and the mission, which is to help save lives at the end of the day.
And so if you could go back in a time machine and give, the 21 or 22-year-old version of yourself advice about, ah, man, maybe do this a little different. Like, what are the things, again, because you're doing everything in most cases for the first time, what are the sort of lessons learned that, someone who's early in their career, I think it's always, whenever possible, you learn from your own mistakes, but if you can learn from someone else's mistakes, all the
Sure.
better. What were maybe some of the things you might do a little different?
Um, Taking the time to understand that it doesn't have to be my idea to be the best idea. Allow team for free collaboration. Yes, you know what you want, you know the vision of what you want to do. It's your baby and you're going to protect it like that. But don't be afraid to listen to outside, input, whether that's from the janitor that's sweeping, the floor. If he's got an idea, let everyone's idea is valuable. I mean, that's how innovation happens. I don't know if you're very familiar with Howard Hughes. I'm sure
A
you
little
are.
bit.
I'm big into aviation, and he's one of my biggest mentors that you would say no longer alive. I've read almost every book or anything I can read on him. I have, and the fact of being a pioneer in things that's what drives me, and knowing that you can't be that by yourself. He's like the guy who says you need a top wing, right? Just because someone says this is the way something's been done all the time, let's question that. Let's challenge that. It doesn't necessarily make it right, in my opinion. So being able to take in the outside ideas and get out of my own way and listen to my own advice is probably the biggest learning lesson. Because I used to be, this is going to be my way, and I got the idea. I got us this far. I'm sure I'm doing something right. And I probably learned that on really early within the first 6 months of actually starting. Is that I would see someone else's idea and I would be like, wow, why didn't you take my advice on this? But then I would implement their idea, and then really came down to matter. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the client thinks. And at the end of the day, if we can all pitch in ideas to make the best solution, and that's where it comes from. So,
So, how would you describe your sort of leadership and management style, and what did you emulate that from?
so my father actually, I mean, I was the guy that, if things didn't go my way, I was, you know, how can we fix that? Maybe that's not the right solution. Maybe that's not the right people in place to make that happen. Or maybe I was over managing, like a micromanager, if we're getting down to it, and taking advice from my father. He's like, you trust these people, you hired them for the job, let them do what they're supposed to do. This is probably some of the earliest advice I was ever given to from him, because I would battle with creative ideas or whatever it might be. And he's like, you hired them for a reason. Trust your gut. Let them do what they're supposed to do. You can't expect them to execute at the level that you want them to execute if you're breathing down their neck and don't give them the room to breathe. So
Right.
that's probably the best advice I have, and that's kind of how I lead today. Every hiring, interview that I'm in, it doesn't have to be my idea to be the best idea. We want everyone to feel the ability to pitch ideas. Obviously, everyone's got a boss, and you're going to get overruled at some point. But that's how you create innovation. I mean, everyone pitching in on what they see from their perspective, because you're not going to see everything as one person. And it really does take a team to be able to build something that no one's done before and, really challenge the way we're moving forward into the future. So,
Remember, I was listening to, I think I mentioned this on one other podcast, where Jeff Bezos does this thing where when he's in a meeting, and they're discussing ideas, he has the most junior person go first
sure.
to give their idea. Because, if your boss's boss says something that's the opposite of you and they go first, you're probably not going to say
Just going to
anything.
agree.
And, even a broken clock strikes twice a day, right? Sometimes from the mouth of babes come the best ideas. Or even sometimes the other thing I think people really underestimate is good ideas come from bad ideas all the time. You know what
Very
I'm saying?
much
Like, y'all
so.
have an idea and like that doesn't make any sense, but actually this one piece of that idea makes a lot of sense. And if we added that to this other idea, now all of a sudden we have a great idea. So
Sure.
anyway, let's talk a little bit about work-life balance. Now, I'm gonna guess, being 24 and a startup entrepreneur trying to grow super fast, that there's probably not a lot of balance. And I think back to like when I was in business school, Sunday to Thursday, I slept 3 hours a week, and I did that for 2 years.
Sure.
Honestly, I think if I did that today, I'd be dead. But I was the right thing for me to do at the time. I was trying to build my talent stack up, and I would imagine if I were in your situation, there wouldn't be a whole lot of balance. But I'm curious if that's the case and how you think about that.
Sure. Yeah. I now it's gotten a little bit better. And that's because people have came to me and told me you got to start looking at it now. Your work life balance. If you're good, sometimes it's better to walk away because you have a fresher brain the next morning, even if it's just 30 minutes, take a step back to trying to solve problems. Because I mean, you get it as a CEO. What's your job? You shouldn't be working on things that are going good. You should be working on the things that are going bad. That's where your attention should be. And at the top, you're your own cheerleader. There's no one cheering you on. So you still got to put on that good face, no matter if you just left a meeting that went absolutely terrible. You still got to put on a good face so that the company's still behind you and that your people are believing you to still execute the mission and the vision of the business. So end up got to be your own cheerleader. And I think it's great at the beginning, and everyone's going to tell you, it's going to take, 12-hour days, 7 days a week, sometimes more. If there was an eighth day in a week, I'd probably work it, right? So
Right.
it takes the time to build a business and put in what you want to get out of it, right? It's like, kind of like anything. What are you going to give your time and energy to? And that's what you're going to get out of it. Now, getting into we just celebrated our third birthday. We're still in a big growth phase in the business, so it still takes a lot of my time, but I find the opportunity to still prioritize whether that's, taking the girlfriend to a dinner or going to hang out with friends for an hour to watch the game or a fight on the weekend, some event, right? But most of the time I'm still working, even in those type of events. And I've also found a way to avoid the burnout. Go to the networking events, go to the events where people like yourself, somebody you would want to meet and have a conversation with that is going to still provide value inside of your business, that you can still take the girlfriend to, right? And still have that, play date, that's still
Sure.
going to give you that, that release of I'm not, behind a computer all day long banging away at numbers. It's still giving me that chance to step back and still enjoy, life a little bit. So there is a balance to it. There was the time when I realized I needed to really start taking it seriously, and this was actually this past December. My father's like, "Man, you are being like a jerk, and you don't even realize it." He's like, "I'm literally telling you, you need to go home." He's like, "You need to go home." He's like, "Cause I mean, you're nerves are just so shot, you're on thin ice, and it's like, every little thing that's not even really a problem, you're making a problem because
Mm.
you're you're overworked, it's too exhausting, you're trying to stay ahead. So giving that time to take a break is really important. So I do believe in that, but it's also comes with risk, right? So you gotta weigh what's important. Like there's times where if something's gotta be completed by, 12 o'clock noon the next day, and you're having to work till 3, 4 in the morning, you just got to do it. Those are things where you got to weigh the risk and the reward of what you're working on. But work life balance is super important. And I'm starting to experiment with it now. I'm no expert at it, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, well, I will say that if I could go back in a time machine and give myself advice, it would be to have prioritized sleep, not just sleep more, but quality sleep.
Sure.
I've been going to a bunch of biohacking events, Brian Johnson's Don't Die and CryoCon and some other ones,
Sure.
and they all say the same thing. Gary Brecka, Dave Asprey. It's like of the pillars of sleep, exercise, and diet. The way I would have prioritized them is I would have prioritized diet first, exercise second, and sleep third. It's reverse. Sleep is first,
Sure.
exercise is second. In fact, I think it was Gary Brecka had said, if you get those two right, if you get sleep and exercise right, yeah, it can't be eating ho-hos and ring dings all day, but you'd have to really have a horrendous diet. That sleep and exercise will cure most things that ail you. But if you focus on, sleep first, makes a huge difference. And even now, just in the last like 6 months, I've made a conscious investment in trying to do things to help me sleep more deep sleep, more REM sleep. And I'm surprised I don't need that much sleep. Like if I get 6 hours, I wake up fully,
Sure.
fully rested. And in fact, I can't sleep. Like I literally can't sleep longer than that. So, but yeah, I think that people can, and like you said, you got to do the all nighter occasionally because there's
Right.
a deadline that has to be met, or you're going to lose a contract or whatever it might be. That you just got to do.
Sure.
But the reality is, much of the time,
It
it's
can
not
wait.
on fire. It can wait, and you'll do it better and faster with a little bit of rest than you will tired.
Very much so. And it's funny that you actually say that because I see that's probably the biggest change in my productivity when I'm now in the point of prioritizing that work life balance. It's my productivity is much better now that I'm making sure that I'm getting my 8 hours. So I'm the guy that needs 8 hours of sleep. I
Mm,
put it in. So I'm a 6 o'clock, 6:30 riser, but I'm a bed 10:30, right?
okay,
Early night for me. Sometimes, 12 o'clock, but it's when deadlines happen. I mean, if it's all hands on deck, I have no problem staying up to 1, 2, 3 in the morning to make it happen. To
sure.
be in the trenches with the guys when we're really pushing to make a development or a new feature get released. But uh, sleep has probably been the biggest release for me, and getting good quality sleep. Sleep, there is sometimes where you're saying sleep is not sleep, right? So, I mean, you can go to sleep and still wake up tired, and I've been in that position. But I've also found too, even if it's just 15 minutes, if I'm like 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I find myself getting bogged down with the amount of work that I have and I feel overwhelmed and I feel a little exhausted, I'll take a 15-minute nap, whether that's just laying on my office floor, a hard floor, just setting my phone next to me, setting a 15-minute timer. And you'd actually be surprised on how much rested you'd feel, even if it doesn't feel like you fully fell asleep. But just closing your eyes in a dark room and then getting back up and going back at the task that you're working on, you'll feel completely different.
So, not doing infomercial, and I have no financial interest in this company, but I learned this hack at this last bio conference, and there's this device called a Brain Tap,
Okay.
and it's like this binaural beats headphones with a visor that has lights in it, and there's a whole bunch of science behind it, but basically, I'll do a 20-minute session in the middle of the day. I'll fall asleep 2 or 3 times in the 20 minutes, and I'll be at the end of the session. I think I slept for 2 hours.
Right.
It's amazing, and it's 20 minutes, and, yeah, it's, there are some hacks out there that can really help you when you do go to sleep, get more quality deep sleep and REM sleep. Because even if you're because what a lot of people will do is they'll drink themselves to sleep, they'll, THC themselves to sleep, and that's not the same kind of sleep. It's
N-
not the same kind of
s-
restful sleep.
Not at all. You still wake up exhausted. I mean, and even not feeling accomplished and feeling so I'm like I said, I'm a tech nerd, so I'm thinking in my sleep, and that can sometimes be a problem for me. It takes me time to actually wind down. If I start thinking of something at 2 in the morning, or if I have a dream about some type of program or solution or something to implement, I can't sit there and not go try to figure it out or think of a problem. And a lot of the times, a lot of the problems I'm facing come to me in my sleep. So if I'm like dreaming about a problem that I went through the day before, I can't not sit there and get up and break open my laptop and start trying to figure it out. Right.
Mm,
I can't do that. What worked out for me is I actually advice from my father because he works very similar in the same way in the way he thinks. He keeps a notebook by his bed and he logs everything so that he knows when to try it in the morning so he doesn't forget it. Cause that's the reason you really get up is you're like, I don't want to forget this idea
right.
or what just came to me. So I need to go try to implement it now. And that process too has helped me being able to make sure that I'm getting the rest that I need and it's not bothering me that I'm going to forget something.
Right. Now you look like you're reasonably slender and fit. Well, you're obviously slender, but you look reasonably fit. Is that just because you're still young, or do you actually, like, do you drink? Do you work out? Like, do you think much about diet or not really?
Sure. Diet, not really. I mean, it's not uncommon for me to crush 6 Red Bulls a day. Like it's bad.
Okay.
But I'm a developer, so I feel like that's probably a little bit normal.
Right.
So that's not uncommon. But no, I do work out every day, Monday through Friday.
Hmm.
Whether that's some type of resistant weight training, but I'm really big in mixed martial arts. That's like my
Oh,
biggest hobby outside of business. I don't compete at any level because my brain is my moneymaker, right? But I love the sport so much so that I'm in the local gyms, I'm training, I'm in with the amateur
Brazilian
fight.
jiu-jitsu or
BJJ,
okay.
kickboxing, Muay
Okay.
Thai, in it all,
Oh,
anything I can get my hands on, I'm training. So in the local gyms here locally in Pensacola, and running around with the fighters. I'm actually a licensed amateur cornerman, so I
okay.
actually
Oh,
go with some of the fighters sometime. Best seat in the house, right? So to actually sit there and corner some of the amateur guys that are out there, I love the aspect and people think, fighting, you get in there and it's just how can I hit the other guy the hardest? But there's such a sweet science and art to it of actually the mechanics and breakdown and actual fighters' IQ on how are we going to put together a game plan, kind of like business, and then execute that game plan. And what does everyone say? It's good to have a plan until you get punched in the mouth, right? And,
right.
and then the plan goes out the window. And it's kind of like in business, right? I mean, you have a business plan you put together, you got to execute that business plan. And how many businesses, Dave, do you know that actually execute on their business plan the exact way they wrote it up 5 years prior?
Honestly, it's funny. Zero.
Zero.
Right. And I remember I had the good fortune. I had one business, and it was the only one that had gone exactly to plan for like the first 3 years, like shockingly to plan. And then it was during the dot-com boom, and we were it was a call center business, and our cost of labor was 40% of revenue. And then our cost of labor over 9 months doubled.
Wow.
So it went from 40% of revenue and we were cash flowing like crazy to 80% of revenue
80%.
and we're hemorrhaging money. And it happened in 9 months. So even from everything's going to plan to we are in deep trouble. And that happened just like that. And so, yeah, it's funny you say that in jiu-jitsu in particular, because I think, I was a Division I college wrestler. And in jiu-jitsu, because there are strangulation holds and, submission holds, it's a little different. Like there's not panicking when you feel someone getting close to a submission is like you have to go through that experience and not panic a bunch of times to not panic.
Right.
And like you said, a lot like business, because my experience in business too is the business mistake or the business, problem that's introduced as an externality isn't what wrecks the business. It's the short-sighted response to that thing that creates the problem that can't be fixed.
Correct. No, very much so. Don't panic. I mean, really what it comes down to. It's a
Yeah.
very humbling experience back to the jujitsu thing, walking in and getting, strangled by a 135-pound purple belt, I mean, it's like, you're like, this guy's going to beat me up. Yeah, he just dog walked you. But, and it's same thing in business. You get punched in the mouth. Now you got to readjust your game plan and you got to stay calm in the face of adversity and execute at the level that it needs you to execute at. Because if you go and try to make a decision too quick, or if you take too long to react to a threat or whatever it might be that's facing your business. For example, your cost increased up to 80%. I mean, you need to be able to identify the problem and then able to execute a solution in a timely manner. But being able to identify that immediately and then put together a calm and response solution so that you don't get choked out because you panicked.
Yeah. Well, so now, so you're still coding, even though you're
Slightly. I
CEO
don't get to
or
code anymore.
okay.
So,
Okay.
which is kind of a piece I even told you, I even thought of there was a time about a year ago where I was like, why am I doing this? Well, let me just bring in another CEO to run this business, right? I'm a developer. That's what I enjoy. I taught myself programming, starting in middle school and then up to this day. So majority of everything I know is self-taught, but I enjoy it. I'm a nerd. I mean, just point blank, I'm a
Yeah.
nerd. But I love it, right? Numbers speak to me. So I'm like, why don't I just bring another CEO? But I really started to find love in the aspect of learning how to be a businessman, come to say, of learning, how to run a business. What are the key metrics that make a business successful? And making those challenges and overcoming those challenges and making the mistakes, and learning from those mistakes. And then I know a vision that I have for the business, maybe, if we ever sell out of this thing one day and it makes sense for someone else to come in and be the CEO, I'm willing to be humble enough to take that. And I do miss the programming side a little bit, but I think right now, moving to where we are today and the vision that I have for the business, I think we're moving at a pretty good growth rate and where we're going now. And I don't think there's anybody better out there to take on the job than me right now. So, and titles mean things to a lot of people. To me, titles are titles.
Right.
Sometimes titles do open doors too, because
Sure.
I've had a buddy. I'm the youngest one in my company. Let me just put it out there. So I am the youngest one that works inside of RescAlert. And one of our sales guys, 40 years old, reaching out and can't get a meeting, but I send an email, but the CEO title gets the meeting, right?
Yep.
So it matters to some people. But you know, I I enjoy the aspect of building teams and tackling things that no one else would ever dream of taking on. I'm not afraid to be the pioneer in something. And it's great because you get to write your own checks when you do that too. So that's a good part of that. When you're writing a custom solution that nobody else in the world has,
Right.
you get to put the dollar amount on that. So I
Yeah.
enjoy that part too.
Well, it's funny. Part of the reason, there's two reasons. One's emotional and one's intellectual. Why I love, so whenever I'm involved in a business, whether it's businesses I've consulted to or businesses that I've run, I either do it myself or I'm heavily involved in building the budgeting and forecasting model. And part of the reason I do it, so the intellectual reason is if I understand the numbers, that, what the real drivers of the business are, both on the cost side and on the revenue side, where the biggest pitfalls are. I understand the business in a different way, in a much deeper way than I do looking at anything else, PowerPoints or business plans or anything else. Like really understanding those interactions. But the emotional part is, I started my career coding. My undergraduate degree was in computer science. And I love the immediate gratification of I compile the code, I run it, and it works or it doesn't work. And most of the things I do, I got to wait 6, 9, 12, sometimes 18 months before I see the fruit of my labor.
Sure.
When I'm building a financial model, it works.
Sure.
It calculates properly, it forecasts things right. And then when I'm looking at, oh, how did it predict versus how did I say, like you've got your AI predictive models, you build a smart forecasting model. Oh, wow, I was within 2% of that, and you have that immediate gratification and most
Right.
things take a long time. So yeah. Well, how do you, you seem like a very down to earth, humble guy for someone who's had as much success as young as you have. How do you keep your ego in check? Because you can't be an entrepreneur without an ego, right?
Sure.
But if your ego controls you versus you using your ego as a tool to help drive you, it could create real problems. How do you do that? Is it your family helping you with that? Is that just you? Like maybe talk about that because I think it's a real pitfall for a lot of entrepreneurs.
Sure. No, and I can completely agree with that. I mean, but everyone, you don't start a business because you want to be number two. I mean, I
Right.
don't know anybody that started it because they're like, I'm okay being number two. That's a first loser. Everyone wants to be a winner, and no one's going to stand in my way. And part of my ego, supports me in that. I don't care who's going to step and try to challenge us. Either we're going to, die before we beat you. We're gonna have to die because that's the only way that you're going to be able to, take us over. And part of that, like you said, is the ego of an entrepreneur wanting to be a winner. That's that competitive drive and the ego. So I do And I would say I struggled with that a little bit in the early days too, but I lean on my family very much, my girlfriend too. I mean, it, being able to have those people in my life to be like, hey, you need to correct yourself a little bit. And
Right.
then the biggest part on that is my faith. I'm gonna be honest with you. So very, very big Christian, it's been a big part of my life, and leaning on that has probably been the number one reason for my success today. If I had to put one thing to it, would be putting my faith into the things that only I can control, and then putting the rest on God, because He's got it. If I execute it at what I can do and worry about what I can control and make sure that I'm putting God first in everything that I do, there should be no reason that I don't succeed.
And were you always religious, or is it something you came to later?
I like to say yes and no. So I was raised, Christian. Part of me, I would say, in the later part of high schools, I don't want to say I stopped believing, but I really fell out of, executing the Christian lifestyle, if that made sense, really putting God first. Like if someone came up to me and said, "Do you believe in Jesus Christ?" Of course I do, right?
Right.
But was my action showing that? Was how I was living life showing that? Was I giving time to give back to my faith? No,
Mm.
not at the level that I should have been doing. And coming back, and it's funny. Everyone always goes to, it feels like, at least I did. So I don't want to speak for everyone, but at least I did. You'd go to God when you have a problem, but never, just take time to pray and just think for what you do have. Because it's funny, we were having this conversation yesterday. I was explaining to the problems of growing through a business, and it's like, I've prayed to be in this position, and now it's a whole set of new problems,
Right,
right? So
right.
it's like things don't just go away. You just get new problems as you move along in life, and focusing on what you can control has probably been one of the biggest things to me, because I used to worry about anything and everything. I'm an overthinker. I want to control everything. It's just kind of my nature. And being able to take that step back and leaning on my family, my faith to make that happen is probably the number one success factor for that.
Wow, that's really it's something that I've been seeking. I consider myself very spiritual, but faith has eluded me. But again, my life keeps putting very devoutly religious people in my path, one after another, which I
Sure.
feel like is some kind of indication of something. Um, but yeah, it's a journey. And so in fact, the podcasting studio that I record in Miami, the guy who runs it is quite religious. We do fellowship most Sundays, and
Awesome.
I definitely find value in it. I'm just trying to find my path.
Sure.
So
No, completely agree, and don't let anybody force it on you, man. Just keep doing what you're doing, and I mean, I promise you, it's probably been the best thing for me, and I think that's probably why I fell out. To be honest with you, it's just something I always did because that's what I was growing up and told to
mm,
do, right? But when I found it for myself and found the value in it myself, that's where it grew for me, and that's where that piece that it felt like was missing felt whole again. So
sure. So you're so young, 24. Let's say that you exited the business in 5 years. You still wouldn't even be 30, right? How do you think about the trajectory of your life, and maybe how you think about legacy, or are you like, what, I'm young, I'll worry about that later? Like, how do you think about that, if you think about it at all?
no, I think about it all the time, all the time. I don't want to be somebody, and there's nothing wrong with it. I know a lot of great people that get up and they're content with working a 9 to 5, having a family, and living their life out that way, and retiring at 65, enjoying the time they have with the grandkids. I still look forward to all those things, but I don't want to be someone that in 3 generations from now, no one remembers my name or who I am, right? I want to leave a mark that people know I was here, and for good, obviously. I want people to be like, that guy did everything he could to help people, in any way possible. And if that makes me, great amount of money doing so, great. If not, I would still be doing this work if I made $20,000 a year.
Mm,
I truly would be. I love the fact of pulling the case studies and seeing how we were actually able to physically help save lives. That's what gets me up and going every day because I take it a little personal, and I probably shouldn't sometimes, but like when something bad happens and you can do something to help it and you don't, then that I take that as a responsibility, right? And you're supposed to help. I mean, that's what we're here for. We're all supposed to give back and help each other to try to make it a little bit easier life. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I also want to I love being an innovator, like being a pioneer. I'm not afraid to tackle the new stuff out there that no one else has done. That's what excites me and makes me want to get up and go to work. There's another thing that I say, and I steal this from my father, and he's gonna watch this, and he's gonna be like, he's taking all my lines, but it's so true. It's tell me it's hard, but don't tell me it can't be done, because anything is the world's a oyster out there right now. You know, can you dream it with the way technology is today? You can't tell me it can't be done. What are you wanting to accomplish? Put a game plan together. I'm not telling you it won't be hard. Don't tell me it can't be done. Not with the technology and the advancements we have today. I mean, look at where the world's come in just the last 30 years, right? I mean, you would never been able to convince the guys 30 years ago that we'd be walking around with cell phones in our pocket. You
Right.
just never would have been able to.
Yeah.
Not at the scale that we have now.
Yeah. So now as you look to, you know, to the future, let's just say the more near term in your business, the next, 2 to 5 years, what are the things that you think are going to be your biggest challenges, for you both personally and professionally that you have to navigate?
Professionally, a lot of the things and this is a problem we see today, but I only see it growing bigger as we get bigger. I think it's going to become a well, let me rephrase that a little bit. It's going to continue to get bigger, or at least for the next 2 to 3 years, and then we'll see it start to fall down. And that's educating people that AI is here to stay. I mean, you can ask anybody about AI, right? Either they're going to be running to it or they're running away from it, but everyone will agree with you that it's not going anywhere, right? It's kind of, I use the analogy, you had the uh, radio, then the television, then the cell phone, right? And it's the same way with AI, right? I mean, it's moving forward. It's the next, and anyone that tells you they're expert in AI is lying to you, because it hasn't been around long enough for anyone to be an expert, in my opinion.
Right.
So, but you know, moving and educating people that AI is not going to, take over their whole life, and that it's actually a tool to utilize to help do your job better and gain time back. Yes, it's going to replace jobs. That's the way of the world. It's going to happen. And that's probably the biggest fear that leans on people. But when jobs go away, new jobs get created. So it's just a new skill set that someone's going to have to learn. And, that's a little scary because no one likes change. I mean, even me, I hate it, but it's part of the world and it's part of growing. So, you got to be willing to stay uncomfortable, and educate people is going to be our biggest, challenge over the next few years.
I don't know if you know who Vivek Ramaswamy is.
I do. Yes.
Actually, not him. I was thinking about Naval Ravikant.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was talking about, he's like, people are worried about AI replacing their job. It's going to be that people using AI are going to take your job. It's not that the AI is going to take your job.
Correct.
And it's the same thing. Like, and the level of progress I've seen in AI just in the last even 3 months is
Right.
kind of jaw dropping. It's hard to fathom what it's going to be like in another 2 years and another 10 years. And one of the other things I find fascinating too is, think about it. So, you don't have any children yet, but your children will never learn how to drive in the same way that when, when I was growing up, I might go to summer camp and learn how to ride a horse,
Right.
but I don't, you don't ride a horse because you don't ride horses to get around.
Sure.
That's the way it's going to be, because all the cars will be self-driving. And, maybe not in 5 years, but in 20 years, yeah, it's going to be, there'll be no more DUIs.
Right.
Right. And people will drive cars in the same way that today they ride horses.
Right. No, for sure. It would be for the leisure and the fun of it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what about, personally? So sounds like you've got a somewhat serious girlfriend, and at some point, again, you're still super young, but you'll get married and have
Sure.
kids and stuff like that. You've got sounds like a terrific relationship with your folks as well as your brothers. How do you think about, family and, what that phase of your life might look like, if you've thought about it?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a dad. So, I mean, obviously, do I think I'm ready at this moment in life? Not at the time that I think I could give it with building the business.
Right.
RescAlert is my child. It's a screaming toddler that's 3 years old that needs every bit of my attention. So, giving it that is important. But it is definitely something, I'm definitely committed to, and looking forward to, actually, even in life. I want that, being able to build my own family. I've had a really great example for my mother and father, and seeing that. I mean, man, that just makes you want to have your own. It's cool to do all these great things, and
Right.
I've got to travel and see a lot of great places. Due to RescAlert, and opportunities I never would have got to do. Work on really cool projects, and I want to be able to share that with somebody, right?
Sure.
It's great for yourself, and it's awesome. But if you don't have someone to share that with, then what's the point of it all at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of building that legacy that I want to leave behind. I mean, we can even get deep into my ideas of eventually maybe even a political run, eventually
Oh.
one day, and whether it's local government or where at, it's definitely piqued my interest, because at the end of the day, I just want people to remember me as somebody that helped people and did everything in its power to help make a difference for the good. And
Mm,
that's kind of what drives me and gets me up going. Also, taking on new challenges. I want to be the guy that's known that's not afraid to rock the boat. So,
right.
and take on those new adventures.
Can only imagine how proud of an experience it must be for your whole family, but your dad in particular, especially working together. Um, Seeing what a role model he's been to you, I can imagine how rewarding that must be for him. I have a daughter myself, and when you see the traits, the good traits of yourself in them, how gratifying that is.
Sure. No,
So,
I appreciate that. My father, he's my best friend. Always wanted to
right,
grow up and be just like him. Uh,
right,
he, I'm always asking him questions. I mean, before I even walked in here, I was on the phone with him and I was
right,
telling him I was coming in here. And he's like, "Man, you know what you're doing." He's like, "You know what you're talking about." He's like, "Just be yourself and
exactly,
stick to the guns of what you know." And it's I don't really get nervous for big meetings or anything like that. I've been
right,
doing a lot of public speaking in front of people, but that all came from him. There was
yeah,
times where I'm sitting in his, bedroom or in his office and I'm like, "Hey, going over, my presentation, what do you think?" And 9 times out of the 10, he'd turn the monitor off and say, "Just tell me what you know.
right,
Speak from your heart. What do you want to tell me?" And that's probably some of the best advice I get. But I mean, I call him for everything, and to think that maybe there's going to be an opportunity one day where I can't do that kind of
right.
is upsetting. But it's a learning thing, and he's such a big part of my life that it's great. If I can be half the man he is, then I succeeded in life.
Wow.
So
I think you got a big magazine cover coming out, if I remember correctly, right?
yeah, so I'm gonna be featured inside of Pensacola Lifestyle, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah,
So Pensacola City Lifestyle magazine, just from local entrepreneurs, got in
right,
touch. They're like, "Hey, you're the 24-year-old that's doing stuff," and I'm like,
right.
"I think that's me." So we had a conversation, and they invited me out for a photo shoot, and I was like, "Wow, this is super privileged opportunity, just like being asked to be a guest on your podcast." And it's cool to see all the cool people that you get to meet,
Sure.
building your business and doing that entrepreneurial, lifestyle and building that startup. It's exciting to see all the people that are doing things that you get to meet, and that's probably the most rewarding thing about it because you're surrounded by people that are also trying to take on the world's biggest problems, and they think the way you do. And
Right.
probably growing up, that's hard trying to find people that think the way you do. I mean, I have a lot of great friends, but they're not businessmen. They're not, looking and sitting down how to build businesses. I have a few that are like that, but being surrounded by people that think that way and how to solve problems, that's some of the most rewarding thing ever because now I have this network that I can pick up a call. I'll say, "Hey, Dave, what do you think about this?" And you're gonna be like, "Well, this is how I approach it." And it's like, being have people in your network that think that way is super beneficial and not just in business, but in life as well. So
Well, I want to get an autographed copy when the magazine cover comes out. So get an extra copy for me if you don't mind
sure
next time
thing.
I'm in town. Where can people find you guys? So if there's someone watching this or you want to send it out to people maybe that are prospects of yours, where do they find you guys?
Yeah, so they can reach us on our website. It's www.rescalert.com. So that's spelled RescAlert. So think RescAlert. You have rescue and alert got slammed together. That's what
Got it.
happened. But you can also download our public app right now on Apple and Android. It's Overwatch by RescAlert. So the word Overwatch and then the word by and then RescAlert,
You showed it
which
to me yesterday. That app was blew me away. I'm totally going to do that. Like I mean, the fact that I can even like if there's roads I'm driving, I can see, hey, send me a text if this road gets closed, if there's flooding, like super cool
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, whether it's a wildfire, a mudslide, whatever it might be, whatever disaster could happen. Let's see you're driving into a county where there's an active shooter that got deemed, or God
Right.
forbid something like happened in New Orleans with the
Or
crazy
California
driving,
fires, right?
California fires.
Yeah.
Being able to know that you're approaching these disasters before you actually get there, and we integrate them all into one platform, so you're not having to sign up for each county as you go down, the line.
Right.
I can monitor, every alert that's coming into the continental United States. Right there from one app on my phone and make
Amazing.
sure that I can monitor and make sure my family's okay from the same app as well. So it's something we built for free just to give back. We don't charge a thing for it, and it's a application just to help keep people safe. That's what we want to be remembered for. We're the
Yeah.
guys that put in the work to I'll make sure that people get to make it home.
Well, Jacob, thank you so much for doing the podcast. I'm a huge fan, rooting for you guys. I know you're going to kill it. And thanks again.
Sure.
Appreciate your
No, I
time.
appreciate it, Dave.
Yeah.